Joining me this week is an author, a futurist, and the 2016 presidential candidate for the Transhumanist Party, aiming to put science, health, and technology at the forefront of American politics. Zoltan Istvan, welcome to the Rubin Report.
Thank you so much for having me.
The Transhumanist Party. Sounds very Philip K. Dick, Tom Cruise kind of futuristic movie, Minority Report, something, something. What is the Transhumanist Party?
Well, you know, transhumanism, it's really the field of kind of using science and technology to modify the human being, but it's all sorts of crazy technologies. But it's been around for about 30 years, but there's never been a political element to it. And so about 2 years ago, I founded the Transhumanist Party, and now we have a bunch of advisors, and was nominated to run for the presidential election in 2016, and all of a sudden it's become a little bit of a hit. And now we have people worldwide that are very interested in it, and we're putting forth a political foot to support transhumanism and radical science.
Yeah, all right, so we're going to talk some radical science. Let's start with the radical science that is in your left hand right now. There is a chip in there.
Right.
You are part cyborg.
Yes, so there's a tiny chip in here. It's literally the size of a grain of rice. It's so small you inject it. You can self-inject it with a syringe. And it allows you to do things like start your car. Or in my case, I have a door opener where I just put my hand to this little screen and it opens up automatically. And it also actually, if you have the right software, it sends out a text that says win in 2016 if I come close enough to your phone.
Really?
So it does all sorts of funny little things.
So what is the element of that that connects you then to politics? Like, why say, all right, I'm into this stuff, and we're going to get into all the AI stuff and genetics and all that kind of stuff, but what makes you say, all right, I'm interested in this, why go the political route at the same time?
Well, you know, we have a lot of scientists, we have a lot of engineers, millions of them, they're doing amazing work. But scientists and many technologists are not oftentimes the most vocal when it comes to politics. And yet, if you don't pass certain types of regulations, you can't practice the science. I mean, we have an endless amount of debate right now about the CRISPR genetic editing technology, about whether we should regulate the field of artificial intelligence. Well, most scientists and technologists are not stepping up to voice their opinions or sending lobbyists to Washington. So that's really what my campaign is about and what the Transhumanist Party is trying to do. We're trying to be, that first organization that puts its foot in Washington, D.C. and says, hey, pay attention to science and technology. We represent that.
So basically, you're trying to just make that leap. So there's scientists just doing their thing for the good of science or for whatever company they work for or think tank or whatever it is. But they're doing it sort of like just separate from the way our public policy is made. And you're trying to link it then back to the way policy is created.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a scientist. I studied philosophy in college. I'm someone who's trying to popularize these ideas of science and technology because I love it. I'm just fascinated with these fields. And I find that the voice of many scientists is usually they're in a laboratory with in their white coats bent over doing their experiments. And I think they need somebody to be out there in Washington saying, how can we get you more either money from the government or create less regulatory kind of hurdles so that you can do your experiments. And in the end, everybody, all of humanity, all of society is going to benefit from more science and more technology.
Yeah, so as someone that's into science and technology, which usually has a little something to do with facts and reason and things like that, you can't be that thrilled with our political climate at the moment.
No, I'm not thrilled with it. Not to kind of bash religion or anything like that, but one of the main things of my candidacy is that I'm running as a non-religious candidate. And we officially have 535 members of Congress, 8 Supreme Court justices, and the president who all believe in a deity and believe in an afterlife. And they're not that interested in reason. They're not that interested in the science that leads, to kind of bionic hearts that can make us live indefinitely and those kinds of things.
They'll all want those things.
They'll want those, but they're not like drumming the table and saying, let's put funding for these scientists and engineers out there. And I think if we could convince them to be, less, I guess, conservative, less religious, more open-minded about the future, maybe the government could really actually lead when it comes to some of these amazing technologies. And these are technologies that's going to make everybody across the country, doesn't matter if it's rich or poor, live better. So that's really what I'm trying to do is, drum up support so that the politicians across the country, and our resources of America will go much more into science and technology.
Yeah, and when we talk about these technologies, whether we're talking about the chip that's going to start your car or open your garage door, whether we're talking about designer babies or any of that stuff. This is stuff that's going to happen no matter what the politicians do. So in a way, you're trying to just give a roadmap so that once this stuff comes around, we have the sort of basic firewalls to make sure we're dealing with them properly. Is that
yeah. In fact, one of the funny things about my candidacy is I'm not totally like pro-science, like let's do it all. For example, I don't believe that we should let artificial intelligence develop completely unregulated. It's very dangerous to think we might have a machine that's as smart as a human being and far smarter than us here in 10 or 20 years. So in some cases, my campaign says take a step back. But whatever we do, we want to ask those questions. And you're going to find that most of the major politicians, like Trump or Clinton, are just not talking about artificial intelligence. Even though I've worked with the U.S. Navy, I had 4 U.S. Navy officers in my house a few months ago. I've been consulting with them, and we all know that artificial intelligence in the military is sort of the most important 10-year window of what you can do in terms of national security. Mm-hmm. Whoever can get to AI first is going to have such an unprecedented advantage in hacking codes and rewriting software and these kinds of things where you could actually literally change the global landscape overnight if you were the very first person, very first country to get. For example, imagine if North Korea got AI first and was able to hack into all our systems, stop our electricity, stop our power, stop the water flowing and stuff like that, and the cleaners. I mean, you could turn off America. This is the big problem, and so the U.S. Navy and I had been discussing this, saying, well, of course, this is a #1 priority of national security moving forward the next 10 years.
Yeah. So is that the only way to get government to respond to some of this stuff properly? Like you have to show them a problem that is so that's so connected to national security more than anything else, that they go, all right, well, we got to get on AI. It's not just something that we can have some guy with a robot, climbing stairs look at and wait for, because this is big stuff.
The answer sadly might be yes, that you do need a national security issue. It's not just, oh, that's fun, you go have fun with your robots or your chips in your hand. Actually, the real reason the U.S. Navy we even got in touch in the first place was they knew that, because when I got my chip implanted I was on a campaign trail, and it was kind of quite a bit of publicity about that, being the first chip presidential candidate. And they called me and said, so we have a problem. We have Navy personnel, new soldiers, essentially, coming on to both military bases and nuclear-armed vessels, and they have civilian chips in their hands that they've gotten. How do we deal with that? We don't know if we want to let, I guess a Navy person onto a submarine if he has a civilian chip and that submarine has nuclear capabilities. We don't know enough about that technology in his bodies. And
meaning we don't know if they have malicious intent with it, or if someone hacks into it and then can hack into it.
Exactly. And that's the real issue at hand, is that so they're actually now creating a bunch of, and this is what their reports were about, they're trying to create policy saying whether you can or you can go onto these bases with this kind of embedded technology. And the funny thing about my chip is I've had it about a year now, but it's basically already obsolete. Like, I can't pay with my chip, but in the new chips that are coming out right now, you're able to go to Starbucks and swipe your hand and pay with that. And that's just in 1 year. So in 3 or 4 years, can you imagine what these chips are going to do? They're going to have all sorts of crazy things that they're going to do for us. You might be able to talk through them like a cell phone. And that presents a huge amount of problems for, I guess, all sorts of authorities, including just, flying on an airplane and going through a screening.
Right. So you mentioned that you're not for sort of unfettered scientific pursuit because of what you said about AI, for example, that it could lead to some terrible stuff. But is there any way to actually control that? I mean, once technology and once science has gotten to a certain point, is there, even with the best intentions, that somebody's going to come in and go, no, I'm going to do the thing that is going to lead to the robots taking over, or whatever the case may be?
Unfortunately, nobody has discovered that yet, and it's part of the reason that AI remains an unregulated industry is that nobody knows really how to regulate it. Unless just by stopping it completely, and then that's crazy. What are you going to do? Tell a university you can't study this stuff? So that's been one of the main issues with the AI industry. Now I actually don't want to necessarily stop it in any way. I would love to have AI. I think I worry, like everybody else, that the very first AI is going to be at least as important and big as the Manhattan Project. You have to see AI in terms of almost like a nuclear weapon. It could be so smart that it could do all sorts of things, and it could be malicious, and it could be very nice. So, whatever happens, it's one of the very few times that I don't want to say that I become anti-transhumanist, but I do pull back and say, some of the experts that have been saying, Elon Musk and whatnot have been warning, they're correct to warn. This is something we've never done before. We've never introduced a species on planet Earth that's smarter than us, and we need to be careful with that.
Would you say that's just the next step in human evolution? Like the whole point is we evolved to get to the point where we could now create something smarter than us, and we are just sort of going to accelerate what evolution is, while at the same time putting chips in our bodies and creating some other thing, some humanoid type thing?
Yeah. I think if I did this interview with you in 25 years, probably 20–30% of me would already be machine parts or completely synthetic. And I have friends right now who are about a year, maybe 2 years away from amputating a limb and putting on a robotic limb. The robotic limbs that tie into your neural system now have gotten so sophisticated that you can grab a glass of water, you can write with them, and
they'd be doing this by choice or because of
yes, that's the whole thing. They'd be doing it electively. Yeah. So it's one thing if you've lost your arm because you were in a war zone and a landmine or something like that. But there are biohacker transhumanists out there, young kids mostly, that really want to take it to the next level, and they're also trying to implant chips onto their brains so that they could be the very first people to commune with basic artificial intelligence. So they have the first telepathic communication with machines, because we now have so much different types of brainwave headsets and brainwave technology that you can actually put a chip in your head and talk to your computer in a very basic. It's the beginning of the Matrix. Right. But this is what some of these biohackers are starting to. It's a part of the transhumanist community, but it's sort of the real aggressive kind of young crowd. And I totally support it. I think it's wonderful stuff. But the arm one's very important because I actually would like an artificial arm too. I mean, eventually, probably in 10 or 15 years, you can be able to take a football and throw it a mile. So, I mean, there's going to be advantages at some point about this. The question is, how will your family member deal with it? How would my wife deal with it? She's like, well, if it's some robotic metal arm, I don't like it. But it might be a warm synthetic arm that looks very similar to what flesh is and still be able to throw a football a mile long. So we're going there, and I bet in 25 years, I might have something like that.
Yeah. So let's back up for a second and just talk about what got you personally involved in this. What's your background and what made you say, all right, I'm going to start a political party and talk about some stuff that nobody's talking about on the political front?
Sure. Well, I'm formerly with the National Geographic Channel. I worked there as a journalist for about almost 4 years, over 4 years. And I did a lot of reporting with a video camera, solo reports, 3 to 4 minutes long, in between their news show called National Geographic Today. And the reason it's important is that I covered a huge amount of stories in a short amount of time where I kind of really got a good picture of the world. But a lot of young journalists actually start off in conflict zones. And so a lot of the coverage I did was in conflict zones. So I saw some pretty heavy stuff. Deaths, multiple rape victims. I saw torture victims. And it really got me worried about dying. And, for any of the viewers who don't know, transhumanism's main goal is trying to overcome death with science and technology. So the more tragedy that I saw, the more I got interested in using technology and science to stop death. And I guess the war zones really hit it into me. I had a very close incident with a landmine in Vietnam when I was covering a story there. And afterwards, I just said, I'm kind of done being a journalist, or at least such things. I came home, I wrote my novel, The Transhumanist Wager. The book did really well. I combined it with my journalism skills, and I've, started writing a lot about the movement, which sort of led me to being a more visible figure in it. And that kind of led to the Transhumanist Party, and also this ability to, I guess, run for the presidency, because a lot of it is media interaction. And I've been an on-camera guy for a long time, so it's been very helpful to take that. So that's sort of from 10 years back to, I guess, where we are today.
Yeah. So it kind of seems to me that for a full party, what you would need is people like you that are into the technology front. Then you would need some ethicists, some legal people, probably a series of things that I'm not thinking of at the moment. Do you have that core group of people that you kind of use to say, this is the idea, but now I need different people to look at it from their own particular place of expertise?
We do. We have an amazing advisory board, but just to be honest, I don't actually consult with them that regularly, because frankly, they're all pretty important and people, and I can't bother them too much. But certainly, I have consulted with each of them at various points to get, a bigger picture on how to best run a campaign, and also how to grow the movement. The Transhumanist Party in this time, its main aim is not to, it's hard to define what a political party is to begin with, because there are hundreds of political parties in America right now, and when you start one, it takes years. I mean, the Libertarian Party took them 40 years to get on all 50 state ballots. So we're here 2 years into this, political party.
Right. We'll talk about them in just a
We're
second.
really just trying to grow the movement itself,
Yeah.
and hopefully by 2020, maybe the Transhumanist Party would then be recognized enough where we have enough state parties, because we have a couple state parties, but not enough right now to make a real dent in the kind of political way we want. It's a growth process, and it takes time.
Yeah, so you are conceding defeat for 2016.
Yes, yes, and in fact, I have said that from the very beginning, that I was never running to win, because it's really impossible to win the presidency. I mean, you have to be on all the state ballots, and then you have to actually win these states. And even if you're somebody really, really popular, the chances of actually overturning the Republican and the Democrat system is very difficult. What you can do is spread a message, and the way media works these days is you can really grow a movement. We see transhumanism like environmentalism was 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. We think, environmentalism today has 3 or 4 billion people. Everybody, a lot of people consider themselves green. We hope transhumanism does the same thing, and so we're trying to create a roadmap to that kind of success.
Yeah, so with that in mind, you auditioned, is that the right word, to be Gary Johnson's VP? Is it an audition? What do you call it? Did they say come in and audition, dance around for us? What do they say?
It was an interview.
Yeah.
Gary was very early in on his, declared his intent to run for the presidency, and somebody introduced me to him. I was at the time interested. I've always been running. My novel, The Transhumanist Wager, is broadly considered a libertarian book, and I would say that I'm a left libertarian. And so I was.
What does that mean to you?
A left libertarian means somebody who's sort of on the border between being a Democrat and being a libertarian, right on the edge. And that's where I fall, because I don't fall, and I know libertarians say, oh, well, you can't be libertarian unless you're a full libertarian. Come on, I mean, there's gray zones to it all.
Are you for driver's licenses? This is my big one with the libertarians, when they're screaming about no licenses, and it's like, guys, if that's what you're fighting about, then this is never going to be real.
No, I am absolutely for driver's licenses. Yeah. I find like you just got to be realistic, because after all, you can't just jump in there and expect to change the world unless you're going to also compromise a bit. So I try to compromise quite a bit more. But Gary Johnson invited me to spend, be a guest at his house in New Mexico. It was just him. I spent the night. I interviewed with him. He made me dinner. We watched Orphan Black together. He actually introduced me to, so that was great, because he hadn't been introduced to Orphan Black. But he also introduced me to House of Cards, which I had never actually seen. I have 2 kids, so I don't have a TV at home. And so I've been watching those addictively now. And then the next morning we continued our conversation. And I don't think, he told me up front that you don't have much of, you probably don't have much of a shot, because I'll probably be able to get a governor of some sort. But I'm interested in what you represent, because you're young and you have a millennial crowd, and you're also, I think Gary's very interested in science and technology. So for me, it was an honor to literally talk to him for 16, 18 hours over time, and he picked my brain, I picked his brain, and I became a big fan of his, to be honest. And But I didn't get the job. I wish I had.
Yeah.
I wish I had.
I won't ask if you guys smoked pot, but you can just nod appropriately if...
No comment.
Fair enough. It's interesting you mentioned Orphan Black, because have you seen Black Mirror by any chance, which is also on Netflix?
You know, I've seen only one.
So Black Mirror, I've mentioned it on the show a couple of times, really all about how we're all, I don't have my phone on me now, they took it away from me, but that we're all walking around with this device and that it's becoming a mirror to us of our lives. And what I love about it is that it's showing the future in only 3 or 4 years, how subtle changes will actually change us a lot. How much do you think just the phone and the technology, the power that we're all walking around with is changing us without us even realizing it?
I think it's dramatic. I think, for example, even this election cycle, no one's seen such hate, no one's seen such trolling. I think that's a direct result of our ability to be 24 hours a day connected. We've never been so connected. It's because of the phones, it's because of the devices. We're becoming a nation of sort of haters and trolls because we have more content hitting our brains than we've ever had before. And that may or may not be good. Mm-hmm. I think these are the kinds of changes that are happening just you see in the real life. You don't even need to make a Hollywood film on it. So I think it's very important. But one of the most striking stories I think of the last few years that's really hit me is Uber. Everybody was so excited they had a new chance to have an Uber career as a driver, as an Uber driver, and you could make money doing that. And now all of a sudden Uber, like literally within a couple of years now, introducing driverless Ubers. Yeah. So that entire career that was made so many young people excited is almost now gone.
Yeah.
And that's how quickly the acceleration of technology is happening these days. Nobody realizes that what happened in 10 years is going to happen in the next 5 years, that amount of change.
Yeah.
But then after 5 years, it's 2.5 years. Then it's 1.25. So you go out 10 years and you're literally making up 4 or 5 times the amount of change that's happened in the last decade. We are not prepared for it. It's going to be super exciting. We're going to stumble a lot as a society.